Good morning. Welcome back to the podcast. And the snow has gone, but the rain has arrived as warmer temperatures have hit. I'm back in Hadfield Station, which seems to be a bit busier than when I've been here previously, because we've caught a time when a train is about to arrive. Today I'm heading down the Longdendale Trail, fairly flat, we hope. Hopefully relatively covered to protect us from the rain, although there were some trees down the other day from the wind and the snow, so we'll find out how far we get. But today I am walking with David Jones of the Glossop Chronicle, although do you still count yourself as David Jones of the Glossop Chronicle? Because technically you've retired, but you're still in there every week, David.
Well, still out and about and still contributing to the nostalgia page where we look back on happenings in Glossop from, well, almost the early days of the newspaper right up to the present time.
Yeah, and 1859, I think, was the first year of the newspaper?
Yes, and at one time, when Glossop Heritage Centre was open on Henry Street, I used to go up every week and look through some of the very, very old editions, which, dated back to the 1890s at least. Very, very fragile, so we had to be careful how we handled them. But of course now on the microfiche, and they can be viewed at Glossop Library.
By anybody?
By anyone.
If you've got the time and the patience, I think we should add that caveat in.
Well, that's it, and the library staff are very friendly, because I'm useless on any kind of technology and machines, but they'll help you. They'll set up the microfiche machine. They'll get the actual edition you want out of the files, and they're there if you go wrong, so it's ideal.
Fantastic. Well, I'm just going to... having paper and when it rains is never a good idea. I guess you probably learnt this in your career.
Very much so, yeah.
Right, this an article which was in David's Nostalgia column relatively recently, I thought was a great one for just to mention. We're going to go through and mention some of the newspaper articles of note for this area. But one that you put in recently, the title of the article was Electric Trains Were on Track in Glossop. And in this, it talks about the line from Glossop to Manchester had been electrified and the new age of the train had begun. Rail journeys on the track to the city had been long and not always comfortable before electric trains took over in 1954. Steam trains may seem romantic now, but they rattled and bumped along, and opening windows filled carriages with fumes. So they had a bit of a party then in 1954.
Well, it was a big day for Glossop, because people look back now on the so-called romantic age of the steam, but the journeys could be very, very uncomfortable. And if you opened the window and looked out, you're quite allowed to get a speck of dust and dirt in your eyes. So, romantic age of the train, probably not looking back.
I mean, it says here, the British Rail publicity machine had promised passengers they would travel in luxury between Glossop and Manchester, and that the smooth and almost quiet journey would take no more than 45 minutes.
It was probably a luxury compared with the old steam trains, and it was it's a new innovation, and Glossop people have been looking forward to something like this, and not only Glossop people, but of course people living in towns further down the line in what we now call Tameside.
Well, we will pin this particular article to the map on longdendaletales.co.uk, and I'm going to put that in my pocket before it disintegrates in the rain that we are about to head out. Right, shall we head towards the trail?
Why not?
So, David, has the Glossop Chronicle always been the Glossop Chronicle? Has it had other guises over the years?
Well, in the early days it was known as the Glossop Chronicle and Advertiser, and the title, as we call it then, the masthead, was emblazoned across the front page, which was then a broadsheet in thick black Gothic type.
I mean, it must be wonderful looking at some of these articles. We have been digging out. In fact, I've done some screenshots which I pinned to our map with the help of Glossop Heritage Trust, actually. Kate Raine there has pulled out some fantastic articles I mean, one of the ones that you highlighted in your 75 years ago today, or your nostalgia column anyway, was the riders who opened the trail. This is down near Torside.
Oh yes, yeah, it was, in those days, it was a level crossing, of course, on the Manchester to Glossop line, and they opened it with a horse rider cutting a tape and declaring the trail well and truly open.
In fact, I've got that here. So that article came out originally 22nd of June 95, and it was Lady Townley, wife of Lancashire's Lord Lieutenant, was in town to officially open the way which runs to Torside to Woodhead Tunnel.
That was it.
So were you there then, reporting on that one? Because it's got your name on this.
I must have been. Yes, I was actually. Yeah, it was. I can't remember what the weather was like. No doubt it was probably like this, you know.
It's June, come on, there's got to be hope.
Yeah, in fact, as we were speaking, as we were walking towards the start of the Longdendale Trail, nice strong wind, but for the time being the rain seemed to have held off.
Yeah, well, you need that when you're cutting the ribbon. You don't need it blowing all over the place,
well,
do you?
Well, you don't.
One of the articles which Kate had found actually was back in 1981, and in that she was talking about the plans for the Longdendale Trail, actually, to kind of reinvigorate the valley and east of Tintwistle. And in it was kind of calling it as a beauty treatment go-ahead. I mean, it's something I suppose that many of us take for granted, that the trail has just always been here. But, you know, I suppose the period between when the railway was closed and what the trail is today, I can't imagine what was happening around here, really. Was there much? Was it accessible?
It was, and it wasn't. It was accessible by public transport, by buses. They weren't all that regular, and people coming by car. But it wasn't accessible as it is today. But people got there, and the plan which Kate was referring to, they wanted to open up the Longdendale Valley, and in particular they wanted to make more recreational use of some of the reservoirs in Longdendale, particularly the ones at Tintwistle, and the ideas were to sailing, which happened, and also sub-aqua diving. Now, I don't think that ever got off the ground, but it was on the wish list. I say we have boating now and fish and angling as well. It has opened up an expansive, absolutely beautiful countryside, which you can see as we walk along the trail this morning. Hopefully the weather doesn't close in on us.
Yeah, we are now just walking onto the top of the trail, and this is where you see the dry stone wall, which almost marks the start. It feels like you're on a proper railway then when you see that bit of dry stone wall. I mean, the other end, the Woodhead tunnels, was obviously something that was talked a lot about in the local newspaper. I'm just looking here on one very, very, very old article. Can I even see? I think it says here, well, this is the Reporter, 1954, New Woodhead Tunnel Epic Achievement. And in it there it has the amazing photos of the tunnel in all its glory. It talks about travel before the railways. It really documents the history of what this means to this area. I mean, you did, when you delved into the archive, you did see about some of the people who might, say, be passing through here on train, one of which you found dated back to 1948, a very prominent football match that was happening.
Yeah, that's it. I think Manchester United were in the, I think it's a quarter-final.
Semi-final.
Semi-final,
I think it was the FA Cup semi-final.
That was it. And British Rail, as the operators were called in those days, they reckon that there will be 21,000 people going from Manchester to watch the game at Hillsborough.
Sheffield, yeah.
In Sheffield. So they put on 12 special trains.
Yeah.
Didn't say how many carriages per team, but I would think it'd be quite a lot to transport incredible though it may seem, the bulk of the 21,000 fans.
Yeah, I guess to alleviate the
Sheffield.
pressure on the roads.
Well, that's it. And I still imagine quite a number of people would actually travel by coach or travel in private cars to the game, but the majority boarded the trains in Manchester Piccadilly and then came all the way through Longdendale, through the tunnel to the football match.
I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? Because actually, you know, the pub that we've just walked past there, the Palatine, I always thought of that as a United pub. Maybe I'm wrong, but certainly lots of United photos there. So to think that many moons ago there were, you know, potentially up to 21,000 United fans passing the door on the train. I mean, it sounds like quite a significant game. I went on to find out, well, what happened, and United won, and they got through to their first FA Cup final at Wembley in 39 years. I mean, seems like a different world then, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And I suppose it was a very noisy journey on the way back from Sheffield, and no doubt quite a lot of alcohol, shall we say, was consumed.
Well, it's funny you say that, because there was something which was in the paper in Glossop Chronicle in the year 2000, 21st of September 2000. And the title says, "Remember, Battle of Longdendale." And it was harking back. You wrote this article. Wonder, you're never going to remember them all, are you? But it was highlighting a bit of a to-do that happened in Tintwistle when Liverpool fans were coming back from a football match. It looks like they were, destination was Hillsborough. Yeah. And the much-awaited FA Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Leicester City. Yeah, Liverpool had lost 1-0 and some of their followers wanted to drown their sorrows. And as the first pub for miles were in tiny Tintwistle, the village felt the full brunt. There was people throwing up in the war memorial.
Yeah, that was it. Obviously the fans set off in the coach from Sheffield and went through the countryside over the Woodhead pass. And the first pub they saw was in Tintwistle. I
mean, I'm trying to think of which one it was. It must be maybe the Bull's Head. Were there other pubs back then? I can't see which date it actually is.
It would probably, I would think, there was a pub called the...
1963, so...
Yeah, there was, I think there was a church inn and the Old Oak. If a member serves me right, they were probably the two pubs, because they were actually on the main road through Tintwistle. The Bull was a little bit further away up Old Road, so the fans wouldn't have seen that. Yeah. So they just saw the bright lights of these two pubs and ordered the driver to stop, and out they got.
I love how dramatic this one councillor is. He says, "This day will be known as the Battle of Longdendale. These scenes were a disgrace. It's the worst thing that has happened in Longdendale." That's what I can remember.
Actually, I'm sure there were far worse things that happened in Longdendale, but...
I think.
That must have stuck out to this particular councillor.
Was it just the fact that they were Liverpool fans? Was that the...
Well, even in Tintwistle, there's always been a bit of a rivalry between the Manchester clubs and the clubs from Merseyside, so... I suppose it didn't help that they came from Liverpool.
One of the funny stories, I suppose, was Dick Turpin. And apparently he was meant to have passed through Tintwistle. This is something that you had some fun with, didn't you? Did you go and meet a man who claimed to say that he had a connection to this?
Well, that's it. Allegedly, Dick Turpin stabled his horse overnight in Tintwistle, close to a pub. Wasn't sure which pub it was. It could very well have been the Bull, and I heard about this from an elderly chap at the time, and he said he actually knew the owner of like a smithy where Turpin's horse was stabled, and the next thing he claimed was that he had the original anvil, which could, and it says the word could, have been the anvil used to re-shod Dick Turpin's horse. So I said, right, I'll come and see. Have you still got the anvil? He said, oh yeah, I've still got it. So anyway, I went up one day and he took me into his garage, and there was this hunk of misshapen metal.
Yeah.
It bore all the... Well, it resembled an anvil, put it that way. But there was absolutely no evidence at all. Probably that it was... I think it might have been an anvil. And that's where the story finished, really, because I say he stressed that it was definitely the anvil that Turpin's horse was shod on, and that was it. So that's many years ago. So whether in fact the anvil is still there,
Well, it should be in a museum.
well, it should, with a little plaque on the side of it.
I'm not sure what Glossop Heritage Trust would say about that, but
Yeah, but Turpin's horses must have been quite. Well, I should imagine he changed horses en route, because I can't see him going all the way on one horse. I know it was to York, but I can't remember where he started his journeys from.
yeah. Oh, right, we're just going to navigate because there is still some of the trees fallen down. It's a little bit easier to navigate than it was on Friday when I was walking here. Just having to jump over this little stream. We're about to get to the first railway bridge, where it always seems to be a little bit muddy under here, so you'll hear us splishing and splashing. There was also a chap who was in Tintwistle called George. I think I've even got his name. George Tharmes, I think it is. And he was a lamplighter. He used to light all the lamps between Tintwistle along the Woodhead. So then when people would get off the bus, they could see where they were going at night. And anyway, he decided one day, I think I need a pay rise. So he went to the council and said, can you give me a pay rise? And they said, get away, you're not getting a pay rise. And so anyway, he went on strike. And in this article, it talks about how storm clouds were gathering over Woodhead, the lamplighter had gone on strike, and the village was plunged into darkness. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, the amount of strikes which are happening right now, and you think of this guy, he was the man lighting all the lights for Tintwistle.
I suppose a very essential job in those days, because there were few, if any, street lights, and mind you, how many people actually walked along the Woodhead Pass once he got out to Tintwistle. Who knows? But let's just hope eventually he got an extra few pence a week, which was probably all it was in those days.
Maybe. One of the other things which seems to crop up, and it seems like you had a bit of fun with, shall we say, was the Longdendale Lights. And there have been so many accounts of people seeing lights and strange objects and hearing voices, particularly around that bit near Devil's Elbow and Brammer Edge, where I'm going to be walking to actually in a few days. What can you tell us about that? That must be an interesting bit for you.
Well, the Longdendale Lights phenomenon, should we call it that, has been around for as long as most people can remember. Yeah, people claim to have seen strange lights in the sky, sometimes zigzagging, sometimes appearing and then just whooshing away and disappearing almost as quick as they arrived. Been going on for years, obviously, and people believe what they want to believe, but we've contacted aviation authorities and asked if there are any planes coming over Longdale at that time, and they're quick to remind us that it's almost like turning a circle to Manchester International Airport. It could have been the planet Venus. It could be the headlights from cars on the Whole Moss Road, because apparently when you reach the summit of Whole Moss, it's so steep the headlights shine into the sky.
Right.
It could have been that.
Is that the turning for Holmfirth off Woodhead Pass? Yeah.
But people say no, we're certain, we believe what we've seen, and that's not the case. And strange you should say this, because looking through the newspaper only this week, and we found a piece by two young girls, actually, they're only 9 years old, and they were playing on swings in Gamesley. mid-90s, not late one night, but it was still a light night, and they saw what they said was a ball of light over Mottram Church. They said in shape it was like a diamond. It moved very, very quickly, and they said it seemed to be like I think it said flying saucer, but they were only 9 years old. And they actually, as soon as they saw it, they raced home, got out an exercise book and some crayons, and actually drew what they saw in the book. And this, like a child's picture of Mottram Church, and overhead was like a diamond-shaped light. Whether it's imagination, whether they saw something, I don't know, but it's been going on for years and years. But recently, the so-called sightings seem to have dried up, or at least if people see them, they haven't been telling us about them.
Yeah, because Glossop Mountain Rescue team have been called out to these lights, haven't they? And they've got there and not found anything. They've kind of been reported. I mean, this one particular article, which we have pinned to our map, says, I saw UFOs, ball of light, and says nothing in the world travels that fast. A chap called Bob Wormsley, who you've interviewed here.
Yeah.
It looks like he was looking out over Longdendale towards the Snake's Pass.
Right.
3 times it came and mysteriously hovered in the dark sky, and each time it hurtled away. Something that Bob found unbelievable. 24 hours after he spotted the incredible ball of light at 5 a.m, Bob was still shaken by the ordeal. I know what I saw, and it wasn't a plane or a helicopter. I will stake my children's lives on that. I mean, this has been quite divisive, hasn't it? So here we look. There's some examples here that you put here, bright lights and flying saucers. So last spring, John Gwynn saw a blue V-shaped light travelling at terrific speed above Dinting Vale. Laverne Marshall of Quarry Close was with family on Woodhead Pass when brightly coloured balls of light suddenly appeared in the car and danced around. In July, school friends Matthew Greaves and David Percival from Whitfield saw the flying saucer. That must be over Mouselow Castle. Number of UFO sightings so great that London Weekend TV filmed people in Longdendale who had seen strange lights in the sky, and that programme is called Strange But True. I mean, I did find a copy of that actually somewhere on YouTube. I watched that episode. Where is this the one where the mountain rescue team were pretending to be Roman soldiers? Is that the same one? I mean, there's been some very strange programmes about the Longdendale Lights.
Oh, they have, and people who have seen them, they're convinced, and they won't be swayed by suggestions that what they saw was something particularly normal, like the planet Venus headlights from the cars on the Snake Pass, on the Woodhead Pass at Home Moss. They're convinced that no, it was something unusual, something that went very, very fast, and they wouldn't be shaken in their beliefs. They saw something, and you wouldn't convince them of anything normal.
I mean, I suppose people are quite interested in the history. There are podcasts. In fact, we'll turn around and head back because it looks like it's getting pretty muddy down that way. So we're coming up to, just over 25 minutes. There have been a lot of kind of TV programmes and podcasts and things about the Longdendale Lights, because I suppose the history here of, in other episodes I've been going to visit some of the aircraft crash sites, and that's where, someone like Bob say seeing a plane in the sky that was moving incredibly fast. I was talking to someone who used to live on one of the houses in Deepclough, a little bit further along the trail, and he talked about when he lived there with his parents. He went out for a walk with the dogs one day, and he could hear people shouting, "Help, help!" And the dogs, he said that he wouldn't have believed it, he was a cynic, but for the dogs chased this figure running up the hill. So he knew then that the dogs had seen what he had seen. Yeah. And that little corner there around Devil's Elbow seems to be just a particular interesting one. I mean, you did also do an article, which I suppose you had a bit of fun with, which was to do with Vale House Reservoir. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh yes, yeah. This I believe was the one where we had reports. This was after a particular dry summer, and there were reports that flying saucers had landed on the almost dried out reservoir bed there.
I mean, that is just like, wow. When you get a call like that in a newsroom, does anything surprise you anymore?
No, not at all. We've long ceased to be surprised, to be honest with you. But we thought, yes. So I went out with a photographer, and we parked up near the reservoir, and we looked over the wall, and there were circular impressions in the almost dried up reservoir bed. So we climbed over the wall and walked onto the bed of the reservoir, and I can remember our photographer taking photographs of me stood at the side of one of these depressions, and yeah, it was perfectly spherical. I would think it was about 6 inches deep, 2 or 3 of them pretty close together. And if your imagination did run riot, you could imagine that it could be the impressions made by some object when it landed. So anyway, we put a piece in the paper, the photographs and what this chap had said to us, and is this the first concrete evidence of UFOs landing in Longdendale? You know, does it give strength to all the allegations that have been made over the years? So we put that in, and I must admit it was very tongue-in-cheek, because we didn't really think it was flying saucers. But having said that, we'd no idea what it was. Anyway, it went in the paper, and wasn't too long before we had the first of many phone calls, and all of them said one thing. The actual circular impressions were the foundations of the mill chimneys, which was knocked down when that area was flooded to create the reservoir. So, another myth dispelled, but it's always a good read.
Well, you know what? Sometimes in this day and age, we need a bit of light relief. And I think it makes people want to go down and see these parts of, the patch, really. It's encouraging people to get out there and go and see for themselves.
And there's a lot of stories about Woodhead, paranormal activities around Woodhead Tunnel, and of course around St James's Chapel.
Yes.
And remember, Glossop Paranormal Society organised a coach ride one Halloween to some of the so-called scary spots in Longdendale.
Yeah.
First port of call was St James's Churchyard,
yes,
which is supposed to be haunted.
Yeah.
And the bodies of quite a lot of the workers who died when Woodhead Tunnel was being built are buried there.
Yep.
As are families who died from, I think it was typhoid, who lived in a little more than shanty villages, as they were called in those times, at Saltersbrook.
Yes.
Now we went along at dead of night, and it was pitch black. You couldn't see a hand in front of you, and we actually somehow, we were lucky we didn't fall over, managed to pick our way in, I say, darkness around these graves. We saw nothing at all. We went to the site of one of the villages, where again, sadly, many people died. Nothing at all. And then in the end, we went to Woodhead Tunnel, which was particularly interesting in a way, because the organisers of the little ghost tour, as it was billed, said that orbs of light, which were the spirits of the people who died, the miners, could be seen on the actual outside walls of Woodhead Tunnel.
Oh.
And I think it almost like the King's new clothes, and we all went up there, and the organisers then said, yep, there's an orb of light, there's an orb of light. And a few of the believers said, oh yeah, there's an orb of light, there's another orb of light.
Yeah.
And it was explained that this was the spirits of the people who, behind the tunnel. And I was with another reporter, and said to me, David, can you see any orbs of light? So I says, no. Can you? She says, well, no. So I said, why can't we see orbs of light and other people can? So I said, well, perhaps it is because the other people have shelled out the money to go on the coach trip, so they want to see something. And we just come along for the ride and to write a good story.
Wow, and did the photographer not pick anything up? Because that's a shame. I mean, at that point, were the Woodhead tunnels closed? Because at one point they were obviously open, weren't they? Yeah. Until National Grid sealed them up. Yeah,
no, they were closed, and you could see the metal gates in front of them.
Which is how it is today, yeah.
It is, yeah. But these orbs of light were actually on the rock face above the tunnel. Mm-hmm. But I said, we saw nothing. My eyesight was a lot better then it is now. So no, it's so in a way it's an example. Do you see what you want to see? I honestly don't know. I haven't seen it. I wish I could. I wish I had seen something.
It might have swayed your journalism forevermore.
Well, yeah, it's and who knows? One day, someone will have.
You could have got a new career, David, of become a paranormal writer.
Well,
could have been like a change within you.
Exactly. But it's just like ghosts and things like that. The people reckon they've seen ghosts, and but there hasn't been any evidence, even in this day of super high technology of cameras, to verify the existence of ghosts or spirits walking around.
Well, if you are someone who has seen the Longdendale Lights or ghosts in this century, then get in touch, because we'd like to know, are they still there, supposedly? I mean, the Woodhead tunnels, I suppose, is an interesting story in that, for many years people gave their lives really to build these first two tunnels, yeah. And then a third tunnel was, as we were just hearing there in 1954, was really kind of shone a spotlight as Britain's first, all-electric main line. We were like up there as an example to the country, and, there are videos, which again I've pinned to the map, by British Transport Film, yeah. In black and white, showing how they built the tunnels. And then, when the train line eventually became freight only, and then there were no passengers, and then eventually it closed, it's almost like it's just a bit of forgotten history that, you'd be like, oh, there's a tunnel there, but we can't go in it, and nobody really knows why. I mean, at one point there was hopes or a campaign to try and bring the tunnel back into use, I suppose, in other parts of the Peak District. You've got things like Monsell Trail, where people cycle along. It's turned into a beautiful path. But it just didn't seem like the amount of work that was going to need to be able to make this safe, that it could ever really be something that was viable. And National Grid gave up, sealed it. The government said, no, we can't make this happen, and that was the end of that. But I suppose it was many years of toing and froing that must have been kind of in the back of your mind, watching that story unfold. Yeah.
And I can remember when I was just started on the newspaper many, many years ago, actually, once a tunnel was closed and before the electric cables were moved in, having a walk with a photographer actually inside.
Wow. We
didn't walk all that far through it because, in all honesty, it was very dark. They didn't have any lights on. But we walked for about 100 yards. But it must have taken a heck of a lot of construction, actually, blasting away tons and tons of rock, to cut away under the Pennines. Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic feat of engineering, and many people say, and I think I'm probably one of them, that the tunnel was closed far too early. If it had been kept open, it would have still been a busy line today, and it would have taken a heck of a lot of traffic off the A628
The Woodhead
road
Pass.
through Hollingworth and Tintwistle, and of course through Woodhead itself.
Although we wouldn't be able to do the walk that we're doing today, perhaps.
Well, that's it, because now we're now walking up what would have been the train bed.
Yep.
And something that we didn't mention, that I once went to a football match at Sheffield, actually on one of the trains.
Oh, really?
And surprisingly, although nobody got on or off, the train stopped at the station at Woodhead.
Oh.
So nobody got on, but what we thought we would do, when we got to Sheffield, a friend of mine who was with phoned his father and said, "Can you come and pick us up at Woodhead Station? We're going to get off there." So he did. So actually, there was about 4 of them to a football match, and the train actually stopped at Woodhead. We opened the doors and got off, and when other fans heard the doors being slammed, they could see all the heads looking through the windows say, "We're in the middle of nowhere. Why the heck have they got off here?" And of course, in those days, Woodhead had a station which was almost like a mini castle.
Yes.
It was a gorgeous piece of architecture. Why it was ever built there, when few people would have actually got on and got off at Woodhead. I have no idea. It must have cost a fortune.
Well, the only thing I was kind of coming to the conclusion was I couldn't put a timeline on it, but at one point when people weren't able to use the tunnels, they would stop at Woodhead, have something to eat and drink, and then horses would take them over to Dunfer Bridge, where they'd continue their journey to Sheffield.
Yeah.
I can't put a time on when that was. Was it 1800s or 1900s? I mean, they delayed building the third tunnel, which was the one that became the electric tunnel, because of the Second World War. They obviously didn't have resources and manpower to do it, so they put that off for a number of years. So I do wonder whether it was around that time.
Could have been, yeah, because the old tunnel, the original tunnels, they were twin tunnels,
Yes.
and I actually walked through one of those as well, and that was horrible. All it was, there was just room for one line, and very, very claustrophobic.
Yes.
And you can imagine the effect on the train drivers in the old steam train days, and the firemen who actually fed coal into the furnace, and they must have been breathing in thick, acrid smoke.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually. By the way, we've come off the trail now. We're walking back to Hadfield Station, so we've just passed Malvern Rise. We're about to pass the Palantine pub and cross over there to go back to the station. I mean, when you walk along the moors now, above where the tunnel was, there are still air shafts, and next to the air shafts are these kind of derelict buildings, which I imagine was where some of the workers would maybe go and get something to eat. You could see there was a bit of a fireplace, or maybe they even slept, in between their shifts. Amazing that you got to walk through this. Gosh, have you got any photos of any of these trips, even going on the train that day?
No.
Well, I suppose you didn't have an iPhone those days where you're doing selfies, do you really?
Well, that's it. Yeah, it was something very much regretted, but I don't think there was the interest in the tunnel in those days. Like just mentioned earlier on, about 21,000 fans actually going on the trains through Longdendale. The actual week it happened, which is around about 75 years ago this week, it made about 2 or 3 paragraphs in the newspaper.
Wow, and all those fans that would have been travelling, and we don't have any photos, or there's not really many accounts of what that was like, because it was a normal time, a normal thing that they did.
If we'd have done more on it, people would have said, well, so what?
Yeah.
What's the news angle in that? But looking back, it was quite interesting. And but sadly, it only made a couple of paragraphs and no photographs at all.
Well, you are the only person that I've interviewed who has actually been on that train line and seen what it was like to get off at Woodhead platform. I mean, that really is quite incredible. And to have been in the tunnels, to me, having only moved here 3.5 years ago, they're almost like these forgotten, hidden locked away places that I'll never get to see. So it's amazing to kind of hear these stories, you know, of what that was like, and try and keep these stories alive really for many hundreds of years. I mean, if people are listening and they do have photos or stories, we do want to hear them, because like we say, it's almost like a bit of a gap in the history, isn't it, really?
Oh yeah, this very much has been lost through the periods of time. But you never know, hopefully someone somewhere in our area may have an old newspaper cutting, may have old photographs of steam trains passing over the line between Hadfield and Woodhead Tunnel.
Yeah.
Who knows? Fingers crossed, Claire, eh?
Well, we've arrived back at the train station, and the next train is the 10:14 to Manchester Piccadilly. Wonder whether they'll be travelling in luxury. It takes less than 45 minutes these days.
I'm sure it did. Half an hour, I think, is it these
just
days?
over, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much. And, you know, for people who live in the area or even further afield, the Glossop Chronicle can be read online.
Yeah.
And every week there is a paper, which I think is a very precious and rare thing these days, to continue to have a local paper weekly. And in that, your nostalgia column still there, and got some of these stories if people are interested in keeping up with this.
Well, exactly. We have a full page every week, call it our Yesterday's page, and which is just that. We know we'll look back over the years, and I'm sure hopefully people find it interesting, and they might think to themselves, that's a new one on me.
Yeah. Well, the whole point of these podcasts and your columns are to make people connect with the history and where they live a little bit deeper. So we hope we've done that, and look forward to taking you out for another walk very soon. Bye for now.